Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for the CPAC for coordinating the outreach, and I'm really excited. I do a lot of this work only on Zoom, so it's really nice to be in person and connect to people. So welcome. This is a presentation called Introduction to the New IEP Form. My name is Leslie, and I have my email up there. Please feel free to reach out to me at any time with any questions. And that's my preferred method of connection, but I've been a project director at the Federation for a little over 13 years. And I come to this work as a parent of two sons who went through public schools on IEPs, and the journey was difficult. And I had a higher level of privilege. I was a white woman who spoke English, and I'm an attorney, and I still have problems. So I do this work because I really think it's important that families have the information that they need to be that equal partner at the IEP table. And so for those of you who don't know the Federation, reach out to us. The link for the website is there on this slide. We are a federally funded parent training and information center. We've been doing this for a long time. We're celebrating our 50th anniversary next year. And we thought we'd be done in a couple of years, tell the parents their rights, get them all set, and off we go. And here we are still doing the same thing, but our world has gotten really complicated also. So our projects at the Federation, under the Federation umbrella, not only help families of children with disabilities and special education, but all those with medically complex needs. So healthcare and insurance. We have projects that connect parents to parents, caregivers to caregivers. Probably not naming all of the projects. We support students in state custody and training their surrogate parents. We have a school finder project. We're working on post-secondary transition with MRC. I could go on and on. So really reach out to us. We have a free call center where you can submit an online form and get answers to your questions. And ask those questions. I got a couple today I couldn't answer, so we're going to do the groundwork to find the answers, and it helps us. So welcome tonight. This is about an hour-long presentation that's covering the new IEP form as an introduction. It's not really deep diving into all of the nuances of the IEP. There are other workshops for that. Come on, clicker. I'm probably too far away. Yes? There we go. All right, it sounded good. Tonight I'm here to discuss a little bit why some of the changes have been made. You'll learn the timeline for implementation, and really look at this new form, all of the different pages. There are 17 pages in the PDF version that's on the Department of Education's website. I think highlight areas where now we're trying to elevate student participation, to have their opinion, their voice as part of this process, and if possible, involve them in the development of their IEP to the best of their capacity. And I think the new form, I'm really excited about it. I think it drives better conversations, areas of collaboration, and places where we can work together. For those of you who are looking for all of the forms, they're on one place at the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, commonly known as DESE, on the IEP Improved website. And so that's the link right there. So next. Fun here. So this was the timeline. Actually, the Federation was part of the project, the Improved IEP project, working with early adopter districts. We kicked off a project right before COVID, and it was really difficult. And I really give these 17 districts who piloted this process around the IEP because we were doing this all remotely, learning how to do Zoom at the same time. But the department finally put out a form, and I really give them a lot of credit because we were able to provide a lot of feedback. I think it went through 2 draft versions before the form that you see now is a final form. And part of this whole process The reason why we were doing this at our state level is to improve outcomes for students. We wanted more equity. We wanted really meaningful access to the curriculum. And they knew the form needed some update because it hadn't been done in 20 years. Some of the language on the form was a little heavy, or it carried a lot of acronyms. So you'll see that it's hopefully in plainer language, easier to understand. The other thing I would suggest, then the biggest change has been, for people who don't know, is we went from portrait to landscape. And I know this is troubling, but you can do this. The other document that I hope you will reference as part of this process, it's on that department website, is the IEP Technical Guide. And so this is a really nice document, and it helps you understand how to complete some of these sections. It has some examples, some samples. So as you download this form, start to look at it, work through it, download this guide and use it in collaboration. And it may answer some of your specific questions. I'm just going to get rid of the clicker. Cool. So everyone take a sigh of relief. The law hasn't changed, which is really great for me because I'm an attorney and I read enough law. And so really we're just putting your child's IEP supports and services and necessary documentation on a new piece of paper. It's going to look different, but the law hasn't changed. And you'll see that the way this new form is written, it has much plainer, easy to understand language. And it flows, I think, a little bit better. You'll see an encouragement of team discussion, and that student concern, student vision is rising up. There's a whole section on student strengths. And I think this is a really positive place to engage our young people, especially as they get a little older and even start to work on the IEP during the 14 to 22, that post-secondary period, where we're planning for life after high school. The more skills that they can practice with their IEP team, I think the better, because they're going to have to advocate in some form or fashion in the adult world. Post-secondary transition planning is now fully embedded into the IEP. So we're doing away with the state-mandated transition planning form, and I think this is really great. Although I love that form, and you can still use it as a guide, families who completed that with a team weren't sure what would go into legal effect. Was it on that form? Was it on the IEP? And now everything is part of one form. And so they know any supports and services identified on the IEP have that legal effect. And I will hopefully highlight areas where you, as family members or educators, can even help your student provide data, provide information to guide the team as it develops this program, this plan for students in school. There have been 12 additional forms that have been updated by our Department of Ed. One of them is here on this slide. This is the eligibility flow chart. I like the way it's set up a little bit. It has the same information, but it's just, I think, a little easier to follow. And so you can access all of those revised forms on the DESE website. Next. Okay, so here's the two links. The form is available in English and PDF version, and we'll go back one. There we go. And it's in 16 different languages. So I think that's really great, so that it's available so people can read it in advance of the meeting. You will see this new form at your next IEP meeting beginning in the fall of 2024. What we're doing is we're waiting for all of the software vendors that write all the code for the schools to be done so that schools have that software to be able to implement. There were some early adopter districts that used Word versions, PDF versions, they typed them up so that depending on where your district is, they may be piloting some pieces or the form this spring. But everyone will see it at the meeting next year. And so your current form is a legal enforceable signed document, has a 1-year life period. And if you don't have your meeting until March in 2025, that's when you'll see the new form, okay? The way I'm presenting this workshop is I've captured all of the PDF version pages, but I want you to realize that when you're working in a meeting and the form that the district might send you, if they create a draft, will not have all of these pages. If you have an 8-year-old student, you're not going to see those post-secondary pages, because those start to be implemented when the student is going to be turning 14. So at 13, 14, you'll see those pages. There's all of the state's 7 required autism questions are now in a printed form on this PDF version. If your child doesn't have autism, you're not going to address those questions in the meeting. But I like the fact that we are seeing a version of everything that could happen and could be on an IEP form in this PDF version. It's very transparent. And then some content just happens to land on a page, because you'll see there was space on the PDF version. And so the new bullying section lands on a social emotional behavioral page. But any team can address that question in an IEP meeting, and I'll address that when I get there. Now you can go to the next slide. So here's page 1, and you'll see we're starting off with student and parent concerns. Student and teen vision. We're leading with the student. And I think this is a really great reminder that the IEP is all about the student, and how can we really involve the student in the planning. So the concern statement, and then as you're looking at this PDF version, I hope you realize that all the boxes that you see on an online form, those would open up, and you'd be able to put as much text as necessary in each one of these boxes. These are just placeholders, so that you know that first box, that would list both the student and the parent concerns. What do they feel they want this 1-year term IEP to address and cover? And I think this is really important. We're helping families really prioritize and write down what their concerns are and submit those in advance to the school, so that you're providing them information about what you're concerned about and what you maybe want to talk about at the IEP meeting. Teen vision is looking very different. And look at it, we're addressing students who are just entering the system on IEPs, coming out of maybe early intervention. But at age 3, a student can be put on an IEP and be in a preschool environment. And the early adopter districts are actually having great conversations with young children about what they wanted to learn in school, and learning their strengths and preferences and interests, and using that as information for the team to work from. They were really surprised. And it also now celebrates student vision. So whatever that is, even though it may be a little bit unrealistic, they were documenting it and using that as information to lead the team. For those students who are transition age, that 14 to 22, the form follows our federal law, the IDEA, or Individuals with Disability Education Act, and they'll address what does a student want to learn after high school, and around education or training, employment, and community and independent living. So we're capturing, where the student wants to go. And they may not have, vision in certain areas. And so that's why it's also important to capture the teen vision, the rest of the teen vision, which includes parents. So your vision for your student will be captured along with the team, because you're an equal member of that IEP team for this 1-year time period. And also, you're going to look a little bit more forward, like where we see the student in 5 years. So we've just even on this first page, we see a different shaping of the IEP form, trying to capture student voice and interest on the form to help with the planning process. Next slide. Yay, it's working. I just said we want the students involved, but I didn't bring my kids to the first couple IEP meetings that we attended. I was learning the process. I didn't think they would have any vested interest. And I learned as they got older how important it was to have the student present. But we have to prepare them, okay? We have to find out how they want to participate, what's going to work for them. And there's lots of different ways for them to participate. Maybe there should be a practice session so they're not nervous. And for all students, there would be some type of way for them to participate. They can escort their parents up to the room where the meeting is being taken place. They can introduce their teachers. They can share their vision. And if they're nonverbal, maybe they can do it with pictures or a PowerPoint. I think we have to be really creative to create a safe place for them to participate and build their skills from year to year. We at the Federation like to do a lot of questions when we work with youth and just try to not say what do you want to do with the rest of your life or what do you want to be when you grow up. Those are big questions, but it's like smaller chunks of like, what do they like about school or what do they like to do outside of school? And then what do they find is hard? So this is something I think schools will be doing, but I think families can also do. Don't do it the night before the meeting. Space it out and just try to get the student to start to talk about themselves, to see themselves as somebody who has information to contribute to the team. Next slide. Okay, we're getting now to a little bit more about the whole student profile. You'll see here we are checking all of the disability types. The old IEP just had a primary disability, and here we're capturing really all of the disability sectors that are affecting that student. And so if you have a student that has autism and that box is checked, what we'll do on the online form is make those 7 autism questions show up and be available and drive the team conversation, that they have to complete them as part of this process. So that's what I like about the way this software is going to work to really make sure that conversations happen that are legally required to. This new form also identifies whether the student is an English learner. And I think this is another great kind of improvement in the form, that we're looking at the student, his language progress that he's making, but also how does that their language needs interact with their disability-related needs. And I see this as an opportunity to maybe invite the educator that's working with the student around their English learning to the team meeting, to be that person with specific knowledge about the child in the team meeting, helping the whole team understand where the student is at. So we're seeing the student a little bit more of all of the challenges that they have. The other thing I love with this new form is they bring assistive technology up to the forefront. And there's so much happening around assistive technology, and so much we maybe don't know is out there. By putting it on the form, and if you say yes, the student may require that, you'll then have to check where we would see that throughout the IEP. So those boxes would automatically open and be required to be completed. So the IEP team must consider assistive technology at every annual IEP meeting. And so if the student doesn't need it in 3rd grade, they might need it by 5th grade. And so it's a continuing conversation, and we're documenting it here. And so if the student does need a device or systems, we're going to say, well, where would we see it? It might be under accommodations, but it might also be under service delivery, because the student or the family may need training. So it's just highlights things to come. Next slide. And so where's the starting point? For those of you who love acronyms, we used to have PLEP-A and PLEP-B, which stood for Present Level of Educational Performance, more so around academics, and then all of that other stuff, the functioning stuff. Well, we're following more a federal trend to have and they're not going to have an acronym. I probably can't do it without looking at it. It's the present level of academic achievement and functional performance. So we're looking at the student as a whole. We're not just looking at them academically. and then how are they behavioral, and then how's their, we're looking at them in a whole set, which I really like. And the way they've structured this form is that there's 4 areas where we're going to document what the current level is, the performance level, that baseline. What does it look like on this student, disability on the student? And there's 4 areas. There's academics, behavioral, social, emotional, communication, and then there's a catch-all, like all other areas. And so I'm going to walk through those 4 present level pages so you can see what they look like. What they're trying to do, though, is capture data from a variety of sources. So we always have the evaluations, but they're also looking for teacher observation, parent and student input. And I see this as an opportunity for you to actually, as a parent, start to talk about, what does homework look like? Is the student anxious around tests? What's the data that you have? And how can you bring that to the team to inform them? And if the student has the capacity, the student can bring data to the table because it's them. They're doing this work. And so we should be listening. So on this form, you're going to see that they're using a strength-based approach. And I really like this. In fact, some IEP teams that have been piloting this, in Waltham, for example, they start with student strengths. So they invite the student to the meeting, they start with student strengths, they do a strength chart on the wall, and they celebrate all the achievements and where the student is, at. And I think it sets a really positive tone for the whole meeting, because we do know that students have challenges, we have to address them, but we're starting with strengths. So it's just one option for districts. Every district can, and every team can really function a little bit differently depending on the student. Next slide. Thank you. Okay, so this is what one of those pages look like. This is present level academics. And you see 3 boxes up here. The first box is describing, from the academic point of view, what the student's current performance is. So there used to be like almost a cut and paste out of the evaluations, but often those evaluations were 2 years old, maybe even a year old. It really didn't document what the student was like in a current classroom. What did that look like? You can put in evaluation scores here, but often they don't, translate into how the student is currently functioning. We need data, we need teacher information here, we need parent and student information here. So this is going to look a little different. You always have the evaluation forms. That's always a document that's part of the student record that can be referred to. But what it's hoping to do here is, especially for the general educators who might be at the meeting, is them understanding, how the student is currently performing. The middle section is that student strengths, and that follows that DEA about strengths, preferences, and interests, and we would document those there. If you had the conversation about student strengths at the beginning of the meeting, whoever was taking notes during the meeting might complete these sections under the appropriate categories. So we want to document student strengths. The last column is, how does this disability impact the student's involvement either in the curriculum or even in preschool learning activities? And so they're going to say, well, where's the student struggling? What do we see? What's the impact? And I see this final column as kind of a foreshadowing of where maybe we would have to have a goal, a skill-related goal to overcome some of the challenges that we're seeing, and in this case, in the academic area. Okay, so each one of these present level forms has the set of 3 boxes that walk across. You'll see here, because it was a PDF and it had space, they added the first autism specific question. And if you didn't have a student with autism, you would not see this in your meeting. Next page. But I wanted you to see all of the 7 questions, because I think it's transparent and it's hard to read on the form. So in Massachusetts, we have a law that requires every IEP team to, that has a student, that's discussing a student with autism, to work through these 7 questions. And I've been doing this workshop for a while, and people were saying, well, gee, one of these is pertinent to my student. why can't I have this on my page? And I'm like, as a family member, you can bring up any concern and talk about anything at an IEP meeting. And so I love the fact that it's transparent, because you may have a student with a developmental disability or some kind of other challenge that affects their social interaction, and you want to bring that up. So this is just a way for families of students with autism to know that these questions should be addressed in an IEP meeting. Next slide. So the next present level page is the social, behavioral, and emotional page. Same 3 boxes. The first box, though, in terms of current performance, it's not as academic, it's more functional. It's like we also need to consider, are there any behavioral interventions or supports that the student is receiving? Are they working? So we're going to talk about the student's current functioning around their social, emotional, and behavioral needs. Student strengths in the middle again, and then the third box, how does this impact the student in their day? And that's, if the student is getting kicked out of class, that's the impact of the challenges in that area. And so we might need to address that later on. And you can see there's some more autism specific questions here. But this PDF version of the page has the section around bullying in the center. It may come up for students with social, emotional, behavioral challenges, but we know that students with disabilities are disproportionately impacted by bullying. And so I like the fact that it's on the IEP, that we're talking about this in IEP meetings, and are there any skills that the student might need to address whether they're being bullied, harassed, or teasing. And I think this is one of those things that you may want to bring up every year at your annual IEP meeting, to do a check-in with the team, to do a check-in with your student. How can we help the student have the skills so that they aren't impacted by bullying, or at least have some skills to address it. And that might mean just going and telling somebody. These are really good skills that we need to teach our students. Next slide. The next one is communication, present level of communication. Same 3 boxes. What's the student's current performance, their strengths, and how it impacts them in the school environment. What's really nice about this new form that I like is it's specifically addressing augmentative and alternative communication, AAC, which can be devices or systems. So that we know communication is so important. And for a student who has verbal challenges, has trouble communicating, there may be a device or a system that they can use. And there's lots of questions here that are driving a good conversation at an IEP meeting. Does the student use it in school? Do they use it at home? Does the parents need training? Let's have those conversations. Let's make sure that we support the student and we figure out where this is going to happen. It's kind of an assistive technology, so we need to know where it's also going to appear and how do we really support the student to use these devices. And I think this is the last autism-specific question. Next slide. And the last one is, all present level, all additional areas. And this is that catch-all, in case something wasn't covered in a prior page under the present level of where that student currently is. And this could be for a student who has maybe some medical health care needs. Knowing that U.S. families, are not legally required to divulge medical information, but if a student is on a health care plan or has, life-threatening medical issues, I think it's good to talk to the team and make sure the supports and services are built into the IEP plan to make sure that student's safe. We also might see students who might be in the community or working on daily living skills, those transition students, and capturing them. They'll also be on the transition pages, but you can capture it here. And we're going to specifically address in the IEP for students who are deaf and hard of hearing or blind, visually impaired. We're now including cortical visual impairment, which is new in an IEP. Do they need specific services? Do they need assistive technology that are related to, specifically to their disability? Because not all blind students would use Braille. And so I think it's driving good conversations. By having these questions here, having a conversation about where would it appear, what's best, we just listed in accommodations, or do people need training around it? And that can be in school and at home, because really the only way sometimes these skills are really successful is if they transition to the home. In school in isolation is one thing, but we want our kids to be in the community with good skills. Next slide. This is my favorite page. One of my favorite. So they've taken off of the old present level pages where it was in twice and put it all together. Accommodations and modifications. There'll be one page. And look at the left-hand side. It speaks to the whole life of the school. So it's not just in academics. Some of these kids need accommodations in those really difficult areas like recess and lunch, because it's unstructured. Maybe after school, or if a student's older, maybe they're in an internship or working in the community or doing some kind of community placement, and they can get those accommodations there if they're school supported. So on both sides, both accommodations and modifications, look at the whole day of the student. That's I think is really a nice change. The other thing is that there's lots of boxes here, but the student may only need an accommodation in an academic setting. They might need prepared notes, but they wouldn't need that in a playground setting out on recess. And so only what's appropriate for a student would be filled in. You can see on the top, it goes across a whole range of things for the student, whether it's the type of instruction, the way the material is presented, how the student responds, and even the setting and the environment. So you're only going to fill in what's appropriate for that student. Same as modifications. It's what is going to be modified or changed around difference. So it could be the content, it could be the way that material of the student is instructed, or the way the student provides knowledge of the content, their output. We don't have to fill in all the boxes, just what's appropriate and what fits. This is a place I think we should invite the students to the table. They're the ones using the accommodations. They're the ones who know what's working for them and what's not, and maybe what's missing. And for some students, they may not be able to express that. And we, as family members and educators, would help fill in the gaps. But if your student has the capacity, this is great to know what's working for them and what's not. If they leave high school and go to a job, it's great that they can talk to their manager and say, this is the way I learn best. This is an accommodation that works for me to be most successful. So if they know what their accommodations are and can talk to others about it and explain it, how they learn, I think this is a great thing. So I love this page. I also love the fact that we can bring students to the table and talk about this to make it more effective for them. Next page. So if you didn't understand the difference between accommodations and modifications, accommodations a little bit more around how. It's really making the material and the area and the room accessible. You don't change the curriculum, it's just, it might change the way the student presents the information or gets extra time on tests. So that's more of a how. Modifications are more of a what. Like they're going to change the content to meet the disability-related needs. That's usually done by a special educator, a related service provider, and that might be alternative assessments, different ways of making the content fit the student's learning capacity. But they may be learning less with modified content because you're modifying the actual original content. Next slide. Then we get into assessments, and you'll see here there's accommodations that are separate.
This is the way our state does it. If the student is taking our state standard MCAS test, there's a separate whole booklet around MCAS accommodations. And those will be listed here based on the topic that the student is taking. But on this page, we're going to list all of the state standard accommodations that are scheduled for that IEP period year. And for students who are English learners, we're going to document the access test because they also have to take that test. So we're looking at the student now in a testing environment. Do they require accommodations and what type of tests they would take? So we're going to document this on this form. When you see here the MCAS Alt or the Access Alt, the alternative tests, those are for a small number of students with the most significant disabilities. And what I like here is an explanation. So the team has to have that discussion with the family, maybe with the student, of why the student is taking an alternative test and in what areas. And so they would have to document that. And so I think it's leading to better conversations, better understanding of the student's, pathway in school. Knowing that students who take an alternative MCAS test, that may affect them to graduate with a state standard diploma because it's an alternative to the state test. Students have to pass MCAS 10th grade level subjects in English language arts, math, and science to be able to graduate with a state standard diploma. Next slide. Okay, finally up to measurable annual goals. If anybody is following along on the draft, the PDF version, I've taken all of the post-secondary pages and put them at the end. If you had a student who was 14 to 22, you would do those pages as present level pages and capture the transition information about the student before you come to goals. But we're going to move on here, talk about goals. So the IEP, the goals are really what skills does the student need to be able to access the curriculum, whether it's the preschool learning standards or our state Massachusetts curriculum. For those of you who don't know what your student may be learning in any given year, there's family guides here, and I love the way that you can just look them up and see what second grade math skills are, 5th grade science, and in preschool we have also the learning standards. So you have access in a very family-friendly way to our state curriculum. So it helps you in case you're planning on where the student is. We're doing fun stuff on Zoom. Thank you. So the goals outline both academic and functional skills the student will be working on during this IEP year. We hope that the goals are achievable and challenging, the Andrew F. case, and measurable. And I think that's the thing that I hope we work towards as a team, is helping families understand how this skill will be measured over the year, and how that reporting is going to come to you, because we are going to have benchmarks built into the goal. And you'll see, I have a couple slides here about the new version, the new look of the goal. Okay, so let's click again. So here is the new, next slide. There we go. It's not happy with us today. Thank you.
Uh-oh.
Okay, well, there we go. This is what the page looks like. I have this middle section blown up on the next slide so you can actually read it. So we're going to start again. This is the goal area. What's the area? And what's that baseline? What's that information from those current, present level of performance in this one skill area? Let's say we're going to look at a goal around reading. Where's the student currently at? What's their current baseline? Because then we're going to look at a skill, and we're going to see where we want them to grow in that 1 year period. So we have a new goal format. I'm going to walk through that. You'll see that we still have short-term objectives. So that is talking about the steps that will happen to meet the goal. And I love the new IEP because it documents when you're going to get reports on that. those progress reports. They're usually tied into report cards, but if your team sets up a different way of measuring and reporting, that can be more frequent, okay? So that's will be determined at the team meeting, and you'll see the dates here. So explain how and when the parents will be notified, and so they can start tracking progress. So next slide. Here we go. So this is what those top sections, and this is what the team will be completing. So the target is the skill, the behavior that we want the student to have. The criteria is really, for me, it's like, what does this look like at the end of the year? What will the skill, if it was successfully, brought to, the student made effective progress and came to think, what would that look like? Okay, show me that. The method of how they would be measuring that progress, how often they would do it, and then who would be doing the documentation. And so we have boxes for each one of those on the IEP. Next slide. So I'm going to show you an example. So this is a reading goal for a student named Anna. And you can see that she's just starting, her baseline is she's got sounds and words, and she's just starting to read. And our goal here is the team wants her to read fluently. Okay, so that's what they're going to be working on in this IEP period. The criteria of what that's going to look like at the end of the year is that she's going to be reading 87 words correctly in 1 minute with 90% accuracy. And she's not there yet, so how are we going to measure her? They're going to use a second grade selection. They're going to do this 3 times a week. And I know that sounds like a lot, but it's only a minute. And the special ed teacher will be doing that. And so it's going to be built into the student's day that the special ed, actually the week, that special ed teacher is going to collect data and actually count with a timer, and one here. How many words that student correctly read in 1 minute, and they'll take a number. That's measurable, okay? Now you can see the benchmarks. In 9 weeks, that's probably when the first report card is. And they're going to take a measurement and let you know, is she on target, okay? The students should be making effective progress. We know every student makes progress at different things. Sometimes students plateau, but it gives you data, it gives you information, and you can measure it, okay? I actually think the baseline should have a number here of what she's currently reading fluently, so that we know exactly where she started. The target in the first 9 weeks is to read 59 words correctly. So we're now looking at a goal in a different way, in a measurable way, so that you can track the progress with the team. And at any point you get a progress report and you don't understand it, that's a great time to connect to one of your team members to talk about how the student is making progress. Next slide. Okay, so as part of this conversation, we're also going to talk about, can the student receive services in the general education setting? This page used to be called the non-justification participation. So it's a little bit more family-friendly, and I think what it's doing is asking the great question, can this student have their needs met in the general education setting without the use of aids and supports and services? So it's driving the question of where's the least restrictive environment? We know that's the best setting for a student so that they can learn from typical peers. But based on their disability, the least restrictive environment might be in a sub-separate classroom, either for half a day, whole day, just one class. And so we're going to talk about that in the IEP meeting. And you're going to have to the team has to provide an explanation of why the needs could not be met in the general education setting. Knowing that we now have placement is a whole separate decision, and that's done after the IEP services and supports are set up. And there's new forms for that, folks. So the service delivery grid looks like the same as the current service delivery grid. The The services for your student, you'll be able to look at that like on a week-to-week basis. You'll see how many, the frequency and minutes in whatever the cycle is of the school, a 5-day cycle, a 7-day cycle. You'll see a start and stop date. Most IEPs cover the 1-year period, but your team might have decided to provide an intense type of support and services for only 3 months, and so that would be documented here. So you actually know what your student's day looks like when you read the service delivery grid. We have the same 3 sections, A, B, and C. A being consults, and that could be with the team, the educator, could also be a professional related service provider, speech and language pathologist, talking to the family. So there might be some kind of consult that happens, but that doesn't involve the student. It's only those who are supporting the student. B is direct services that might actually happen in the general ed classroom. So you could have a physical therapist or OT coming into the classroom to support the student in a skill, in group work or whatever they're working on in a classroom. The grid C identifies when the student is pulled out, and that could be a student who has a reading disability, is now not taking English with their regular class, but are pulled out for that specialized instruction in a special education room. So the service delivery grid looks the same as the IEP, but if you never really looked at it, it shapes and tells you what your students' services are during the week. Next slide. Transportation. Transportation is talked about twice in the new IEP. This is the same section of like, is transportation a related service? Does the student require either support on a regular transportation vehicle or a special vehicle? And the team will talk about that and document it here. They'll also talk about, does the student need their schedule modified in any way? They kind of did away with shorter year, but longer day or longer school year is still here. And this is where the conversation around, does the student require an extended school year to have a free and appropriate public education, which we call FAPE. And so that'll be talked about here and it'll be documented here on this IEP. And you'll see on the next slide, what's really exciting is they have put down a service delivery grid for extended school year. Can you click to the next slide? There we go. So it's the same thing. It's a service delivery grid, but it's not like a student will go to the Sunshine program at the XYZ elementary school for a month and a half. It's an extension of the school year. And so they have to address the students' goal areas and the students' disability-related needs in that summer school, extended school year environment. The team may decide to focus only on one area and try to get the student kind of super skills in that one area. That's up for the team discussion, of which you as family members are part of. So you're going to not only have the service delivery grid, you're also going to have a transportation grid for extended school year. Because often schools might cluster services for a population of students at one school that may not be the school your student regularly attends. And so that we have to talk about transportation, and it's documented here. So I think this is a nice change on our IEP form that is improving the kind of understanding of what would happen during extended school year. Next slide. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about post-secondary transition, and there are 3 pages on this new IEP form that would only be completed for students who it takes legally effect when they turn 14. So the student could be 13 and turn 14 during that IEP year. We have to do transition planning. And this is only for students on an IEP. And I love the concept of we're getting a different focus. We're planning for life after high school, and we're looking at the students' preferences and needs. I said that the transition planning form is going away. It's still a good form for you to review, has some great questions on it, but transition planning is really around helping the student get the most skills, whether still under that free and appropriate public education that ends at age 22. The day they turn 22, they're no longer eligible for special education. So we're going to talk about academic, non-academic courses, maybe education, vocational training, independent and community living. These are all based on age-appropriate transition assessments, like knowing where the student is at and what the student may need. And that's required under the law. So let's click the next slide to see. So this page would come before you created goals, because look at it, once again, we're looking at the student, the transition student, and that transition lens on them in one additional area, in planning for life after high school. And we have that post-secondary transition, current performance, student strengths, and then once again, the impact of the student's disability in this area. So you do this planning before you set goals, okay? I just pulled it all to the end because it only is for a certain population of students. We still have the expected date of graduation or exit from high school, but I think it's nice here they've included what's the type of certificate that the student is on track to attain. And I think here again, conversation about where the student is at. Are they on track to get a state standard diploma or only a certificate of attendance or attainment? Some students may never have the capacity to get a state standard diploma, but I'm wondering about the students that might be in the middle, that may not understand that, oh, I have to do this to get a state standard diploma. I have to pass MCAS. I have to take certain local requirements. And so the new IEP form also documents that planned course of study and lays it out, and you have this conversation with the students in the room so much better because they're helping to plan what their high school would look like, and they have up until age 22 to work on this. They may not be on a 4-year trajectory. It may take them 5 or 6 years, but they're still part of that planning process. So we're not only talking about the planning course of study, but what's the student's status? If the student has failed an English class, they have to know that they need 4 years of English to be able to get a state standard diploma in this school district. And so they're going to have some buy-in to either repeat the class, take it as a summer school, or come around. That's their goal. They might have to stay an extra year to complete that requirement. So I think it's driving a better conversation around planning for life after high school. Next slide. Transition is a really big topic and a big area, and oftentimes our students have other agencies that are working with them, and so I love the fact that the new IEP documents any other organization and agency that the student may be working with. They're bringing more information to the table. So the school will document who at the school might be communicating with these agencies to get information about the student. And we want to get that full picture of the student and what they're doing and what their skill set is. The transfer of rights is another legal requirement, and it's now documented here formally. It used to just be a checkbox, and now it's a conversation, so that the family understands that 1 year before the student turns age 18, that there's a discussion around all of the rights that the families have will transfer now to the legal 18-year-old adult, okay? It puts families on notice that if the student is a candidate for guardianship, that they have to start that process so that the student has that legal protection at age 18. Because, next slide, the student becomes the legal decision maker at age 18. And they will become the one who signs the IEP. This used to be a separate form that districts had, that students had to review and sign. I think a discussion around the student's options should happen outside of the IEP meeting, but you can see it's documented here. And the student has 3 options. They can make all the decisions themselves and not even have the family present. They can choose to share decision-making with a family member or someone else, or they can delegate. And I think they need to understand what all of that means. So they're giving consent as the legal decision maker. This is the students, not on a guardianship, to how they want decision making to happen on the IEP. If there is a legal guardian, then that information is documented here. And then the team knows that they would be the ones signing the IEP. Another area of transition planning is the 688 referral. This is unique to Massachusetts. This one, it doesn't have a common name, it's just the 688 referral. And what it is 2 years before exiting high school at age 16, 18, 20, that a formal referral is made to one of the state agencies if the student meets the criteria. So once again, in this IEP meeting, we're talking about what is that criteria? Is the student going to be accessing adult services? And the reason this referral is made while the student is still in high school is because the state has at least a 1-year delay in terms of its budgeting and planning. So they need to know who's coming into their system and when, so they can budget appropriately. And often one of the representatives from that adult agency would attend an IEP meeting to learn more about the student so that they would have a better sense of that. So you make a referral to an adult agency, but it's not a guarantee that that student would be served by that agency. And here's another conversation that can happen in the IEP meeting, that the family understands that they have to apply for eligibility for DDS, the Department of Developmental Services, if the student has an intellectual or developmental disability or autism. DMH, the Department of Mental Health, for students with mental health challenges. There's a formal application for each one of these agencies, and the family will be referred to one and fill out that eligibility paperwork, right, application almost. So it's just helping the family understand the process a little bit better, and this used to be a separate form, it's now part of the IEP. Next slide. We're finally at the end. So we still have additional information. Yay, this is our catch-all. And I think as we're working with these new IEPs, I think we all have to be patient with schools, ourselves, our students, because it's new. And we're not exactly sure what goes where, and we're still figuring some of this out. And so this is that catch place, that it didn't happen somewhere else, it can happen here. For a student maybe who has some medical issues, is on a healthcare plan, you can make note of it here also. Any type of additional communication logs or data that you need, you can talk about it here. This is where we put all of that additional information. We're hoping that the new form will capture the information in other places, and this will be a smaller section, but we just don't know. The last page is also the signature page. And so you as a family member would sign unless your student is age 18 and not on a guardianship. And so you have to kind of negotiate with your student. Are they going to sign? And do they understand what that means, that they're signing a legal document? They have the same 3 options. They can sign, you can accept everything, you can reject everything, or there's that middle section where you accept, but there's certain portions that you would reject, and you would identify those on this form here. If at any point you reject, we recommend that you go to the bottom there and you check the box that says meeting request, because you really want to meet with the team in all of the areas that you've rejected, because their new goals may not be written, so that now the student is working on old goals. There are state put rights, and that gives you the right for your student to stay in the placement until you can work with your team to resolve the difference and the disagreement. It's not a long-term solution, because we really want the student to have those new goals, those new services, and move forward. And things look different in different, environments, elementary school, middle school, high school, so that, you may need some more information to be able to make that educated choice, but you have the right to reject. An example might be is the student is receiving speech and language 5 days a week, and the team recommendation is only 3. So you can reject the omission of those 2 additional days and be in stay put, and then meet with your team and figure out why are they recommending that, and get some more understanding before you consent, knowing that you can withdraw your consent at any time. But we want families, once they consent, that's when all the services begin immediately. So you have 30 days once you're issued an IEP to consent, and I hope you use that time wisely to negotiate anything you're not understanding, so that it's not considered rejected. Next slide. I think that's just, yes. So there's a lot to learn, and this is just an introduction to the form. We at the Federation have always been doing basic rights training to help you understand your rights and responsibilities, but we think we're going to use the new form as a catalyst to help teach you some maybe other skills around the IEP. The first one here is how to write a concern statement, how to write a short, targeted, prioritized concern statement. And so we're piloting these modules. They're going to be shared on our website. I encourage CPACs to have meetings and maybe use some of our activity sheets to work through this. Wouldn't it be great if everybody wrote a concern statement and read it to other people and got some feedback around that so that people really understand what you're concerned about? It's a skill, and we have to practice it. So we have new modules coming out in these 5 areas. If you see an area that you have a concern about this IEP and where you would want some skills, let us know. That might happen. We have all of our trainings now on the new page at the Federation's website called New IEP. We're rolling out this workshop in other languages. I think there's one posted for a Portuguese version. I know Spanish and Chinese have occurred, and we hope to have it in Haitian Creole and Vietnamese in the spring so that families can use the actual translated versions that are available on the DESE website and work through them in a workshop like this to understand the forms. Knowing that next fall, all of the Federation's basic rights training will use these new forms. Okay, so we have evaluation and eligibility, understanding the IEP, and basic rights transition planning. And so you will see the new form, and there'll be more conversation, a little bit more deep dive into each one of those areas so that you can understand the form a little bit more. I think one tip I'd like to leave with you is to kind of get us all feeling good and calm about this is you're going to get a new form, but you have your old form. Hold them up. Look at them both. Doesn't make sense to you? What might be missing? What might be worded differently that you don't understand? And have those conversations, okay? You're going to be moving forward. I think this form is really going to drive a better conversation and a different process for us all to learn together and support our students. And it's really about them getting better outcomes. And I think the last slide is the contact information for the Federation. We are a free resource, call us. I can't tell you how many parents I talk to, and we just walk through their options. And they can just talk about their concerns, and we can help them, think about their priorities and what they want to focus on in a meeting. And some tips around maybe writing notes, bringing a note taker, structuring the meeting so it fits their, work day. There's lots of things to consider when you're working on an IEP. So talk to us, call us, and share some of your ideas, because you never know, it might fit into a workshop. So thank you so much for hosting me tonight. I'm really passionate about this topic. I really think it's an opportunity for us to really work better with our schools, because when the family engagement research says when schools and families work together, students have better outcomes. They attend school more, they like it better, and they're more engaged in some of the difficult work that they have to do. So I think this is an opportunity for us to work together. So thank you so much, Franklin Public Schools and CPAC. Glad to be here tonight.